The morning sky over Seoul changed from blue to black in seconds. Jin-ho was loading cargo containers onto his transport ship when the first shadow fell across the landing pad. He looked up and saw something that made his hands freeze on the loading crane controls. A massive ship hung in the air above the city, so large it blocked out the sun completely. The ship was not like anything humans had ever built. It was dark metal with strange curves and angles that hurt to look at. Red lights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. More ships appeared over other parts of the city, then over other cities around the world. Within an hour, every major population center on Earth had one of these giant vessels hovering overhead. Mira was in her laboratory at the Seoul Space Research Institute when the emergency alarm started screaming. She ran to the window and saw the alien ship hanging above the city like a storm cloud. Her hands shook as she reached for her communication device. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life, but she had never imagined it would arrive like this. At the asteroid mining station beyond Earth's orbit, Tai Min watched the alien fleet through his scope with growing dread. He counted at least 50 ships of various sizes approaching Earth. His military training told him this was not a peaceful visit. He immediately sent a warning signal to Earth, but he knew it was probably too late. In the underground tunnels beneath Seoul, Da-eun was working on her computer when every screen in her hideout suddenly displayed the same message in perfect Korean. The words appeared in every language on Earth at the same time. The message was simple and terrifying. People of Earth, you will surrender now. Resistance will make your transition to useful work more difficult. Prepare for collection. The aliens called themselves the Kethmar Empire. Their leader, War Commander Velthok, stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the blue planet below. To him, this was just another routine operation. His empire had conquered 17 different worlds in the past 1,000 years. Each conquest followed the same pattern: arrival, demonstration of power, surrender, and collection of the new slave population. The war commander had studied the reports about Earth. The humans had achieved basic space travel but were still confined mostly to their home system. Their technology was primitive compared to Kethmar standards. Their planet was divided into many small nations that fought among themselves. Everything indicated this would be an easy conquest. The first collection pods launched from the alien ships at noon. These were large, box-shaped vehicles designed to land in populated areas and gather humans for transport. Each pod could hold about 200 people and was equipped with stunning weapons that would make resistance impossible. The pods began landing in city centers around the world. Jin-ho was still at the landing pad when the first pod crashed, down 50 meters away from his ship. The impact shook the ground and shattered windows in nearby buildings. A ramp extended from the pod and strange figures emerged. The aliens were tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms. They wore dark armor and carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. The aliens began herding people toward their pod using their stunning weapons. Anyone who tried to run or fight was hit with a blue beam that made them collapse but did not kill them. Jin-ho watched in horror as his fellow workers were forced into the pod like cattle. He knew he had to do something, but what could one man do against such advanced technology? Mira saw the collection process from her laboratory window. The aliens moved with mechanical efficiency, sorting people by age and health. They seemed to have specific quotas for different types of humans. Children and elderly people were left behind, while adults in good health were taken. The whole operation looked like it had been planned and practiced many times before. But something unexpected began to happen. Unlike the aliens' previous conquests, humans did not simply accept their fate. In Seoul, a group of construction workers, led by a man named Hyunwoo, began fighting back with whatever tools they could find. They threw rocks and swung hammers at the alien soldiers. The stunning weapons stopped some of them, but others kept fighting even after being hit multiple times. Tae-min arrived at Earth just as the collection was beginning. He guided his mining ship towards Seoul, using asteroid mining explosives as improvised weapons. His ship was small and fast compared to the alien vessels, and he managed to damage one of the collection pods before they could react. The explosion freed about 50 people who had been captured. The war commander watched the resistance with growing confusion. According to all their data, species at this technological level always surrendered within the first day. Fear of superior firepower. usually made organized resistance impossible, but humans seemed to be reacting differently than expected. In the underground tunnels, Da-un began working frantically on her computers. She discovered that the alien communication systems were not as secure as they appeared. Their technology was advanced, but seemed designed for managing surrendered populations rather than fighting wars. She began intercepting their messages and learning about their methods. The aliens had expected to collect 10 million humans on the first day. Instead, they managed to capture only about 2 million, and many of their collection pods were damaged or destroyed by human resistance. The stunning weapons that worked perfectly on other species seemed less effective on humans, who often continued fighting even after being hit. Jin-ho organized the workers at the landing pad into a resistance group. They used cargo loading equipment as weapons and created barriers from shipping containers. When the aliens returned with reinforcements, they found the landing pad turned into a fortress. The humans fought with desperate courage, using every tool and machine they could find as weapons. Mira made an important discovery while studying pieces of alien technology that had been damaged in the fighting. The Kethmar weapons and armor were designed for compliance operations, not warfare. Their energy weapons were meant to stun and control, not kill. Their armor protected against the types of weapons used by their previous conquests, but human projectile weapons could penetrate it. The first day of the invasion ended with the aliens controlling less than 10% of Earth's major cities. Massive areas remained under human control, and resistance groups were forming everywhere. The collection pods had been driven out of many areas by coordinated human attacks using improvised weapons and sheer determination. Taemin established a communication network between the various resistance groups using his mining ship's equipment. He discovered that similar scenes were playing out all over the world. Humans were refusing to surrender even when facing overwhelming odds. They were sharing information about alien weaknesses and coordinating attacks across continents. War Commander Veltak reviewed the day's reports with growing alarm. No previous conquest had gone this badly. The humans were not following any of the expected behavioral patterns. They seemed to value something called freedom more than their own safety. This was a concept that did not exist in Kethmar culture and was not accounted for in their conquest protocols. As night fell over Earth, fires burned in dozens of cities where humans and aliens had fought. The resistance was growing stronger by the hour as people realized the aliens could be hurt and their technology could be overcome. Da-un's intercepted messages revealed that the Kethmar had never faced anything like this before. Their empire was built on the assumption that all intelligent life would choose survival over resistance. The aliens had come to Earth expecting to find another species ready to trade freedom for life. Instead, they found humans who would rather die fighting than live as slaves. This simple difference in values would change everything, though neither side understood it yet. The war for Earth had begun, and it would be unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever seen. 3 weeks after the first alien ships appeared, Jin-ho's cargo vessel had become something he never expected. A floating headquarters for the resistance. His ship moved between the scattered islands off the Korean coast, carrying supplies and rescued people to safety. The cargo hold that once carried trade goods now held weapons, medical supplies, and refugees from the alien collection zones. Mi-Ra worked day and night in the ship's converted laboratory, studying every piece of alien technology they could recover. The fragments of damaged Kethmar equipment told a disturbing story. These aliens had conquered many worlds before Earth, and they had developed their methods through centuries of practice. But all their previous victims had been different from humans in one crucial way. The alien technology was designed around the assumption that conquered species would form hierarchical surrender structures. When faced with superior force, most intelligent species would organize their leaders into negotiation groups and eventually accept subjugation to preserve their population. The Kethmar weapons, ships, and tactics were all built for managing this type of orderly surrender. Taemin coordinated attacks from his mobile command post, using his knowledge of military strategy to turn civilian resistance into effective guerrilla warfare. His mining equipment had proven surprisingly useful as weapons. Industrial explosives designed for breaking apart asteroids could destroy alien vehicles. Heavy drilling machines could punch through their armor. Mining ships were fast and hard to track. The aliens were learning that human resistance followed no logical pattern. In Busan, a group of fishermen led by an old captain named Dong Min had turned their boats into a naval force, using modified fishing nets to entangle alien aircraft. In Daegu, factory workers had converted their production lines to make crude but effective weapons. Every human community seemed to develop its own unique methods of fighting back. Daeun had moved her operation to Jinho's ship, where she worked on intercepting alien communications from a sophisticated computer setup in what used to be the captain's quarters. What she discovered in the alien messages was both encouraging and terrifying. The Kethmar Empire was struggling to understand what was happening on Earth, but they were also calling for more ships and troops. The intercepted messages revealed that the aliens had never encountered anything like human behavior. In their previous conquests, resistance had always been organized, predictable, and ultimately futile. Species fought in conventional ways that could be countered with superior technology. They had leaders who could be targeted or corrupted. They valued preservation of their civilization above all else. Humans were different. When their leaders were captured or killed, new ones emerged from nowhere. When their cities were destroyed, they kept fighting from the ruins. When their weapons were taken away, they made new ones from scrap metal and household chemicals. Most confusing of all, humans seemed willing to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met. Mira made a breakthrough when she managed to partially decode Kethmar behavioral analysis reports. The aliens studied the psychology of species before conquering them, looking for the most efficient methods of control. Their files contained detailed studies of 17 different alien civilizations, all of which had eventually submitted to Kethmar rule. Each previous conquest had followed a similar pattern. Initial resistance would last a few days or weeks. Then, as casualties mounted and the futility of fighting became clear, the conquered species would begin negotiating for better treatment in exchange for cooperation. Within a year, most would be fully integrated into the Kethmar slave system. But the reports about humans were filled with notes of confusion and concern. The behavioral specialists could not explain why humans continued fighting when victory was clearly impossible. They had no framework for understanding a species that chose death over subjugation. Their psychological models predicted that human resistance should have collapsed within the first week. Taemin discovered this difference in a more practical way when he led an attack on an alien supply depot. The depot was heavily defended, and the assault would be extremely dangerous. When he explained the plan to his team, every single person volunteered for the most dangerous positions. This was not because they were foolish or unaware of the risks, but because they had decided that some things were worth dying for. The attack succeeded, but at a terrible cost. Half of Taemin's team was killed or wounded in the fighting. Yet, instead of retreating or negotiating, the survivors immediately began planning their next attack. They took the captured alien supplies and distributed them to other resistance groups rather than keeping them for themselves. This behavior was completely alien to Kethmar thinking. Jinho saw this same pattern everywhere he traveled. In Jeju Island, a teacher named Sunja had organized the children into a communication network, using their knowledge of video games to understand alien technology faster than adults. In Incheon, dock workers led by a woman named Yoon-ji had turned the port into a fortress, using shipping cranes as weapons platforms. What amazed Jinho most was that these groups worked together despite having no central command structure. They shared information, resources, and tactical knowledge freely. When one group was under attack, others would immediately move to help, even if it put their own operations at risk. This kind of cooperation was unknown in Kethmar society. The aliens operated under a strict hierarchy where information and resources flowed downward from commanders to subordinates. The idea of horizontal cooperation between equal groups was foreign to them. Their tactical software could not predict human behavior because it was based on assumptions about how intelligent species should organize themselves. Da-Eun's analysis of intercepted communications revealed that the Kethmar were facing problems on multiple fronts. Other conquered species had begun showing signs of unrest after learning about human resistance through smuggled communication devices. The Empire's carefully maintained order was starting to crack as subject populations began asking dangerous questions about whether their masters were truly invincible. Mi-Ra's research into alien biology provided another crucial insight. The Kethmar had evolved from a species similar to Earth's social insects. They had natural castes and instinctive hierarchies. Individual identity, as humans understood it, did not exist in their culture. When a Kethmar soldier died, it was seen as no more significant than losing a tool. The concept of individual sacrifice for abstract ideals was literally incomprehensible to them. This biological difference explained why their conquest methods were failing. All their previous victims had been species with similar hierarchical thinking. When their leaders surrendered, the entire population followed. But humans had no single authority structure. Every individual human seemed capable of becoming a leader when circumstances required it. Taemin experienced this firsthand when his communication equipment was destroyed during a particularly intense battle. He expected the various resistance groups to become isolated and vulnerable without central coordination. Instead, local leaders immediately stepped up to fill the gap. New communication networks formed organically. The resistance became stronger and more adaptable, not weaker. The aliens responded by increasing the intensity of their collection operations. More ships arrived from other parts of their empire, bringing new weapons and tactics that had proven successful on other worlds. But each escalation only seemed to make human resistance more determined. Stories of alien cruelty spread quickly through the resistance networks, motivating even peaceful civilians to take up arms. Jin-Ho witnessed one of these escalations when the aliens attacked a refugee camp on Ganghwa Island. The camp housed mostly elderly people, children, and wounded resistance fighters. It had no military value, but the aliens destroyed it anyway, apparently hoping to break human morale through terrorism. The result was exactly the opposite of what the aliens intended. News of the massacre spread throughout the resistance network, within hours. Instead of surrendering in fear, humans everywhere became more determined to fight. New volunteers joined the resistance faster than the aliens could eliminate them. The attack had transformed thousands of neutral civilians into active fighters. Mira realized that the aliens had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human psychology. They assumed that increasing fear would decrease resistance, as it had with their previous conquests. But humans seemed to have an inverse relationship with fear and submission. The more brutal the aliens became, the more fiercely humans fought back. Da Yun's intercepts revealed that Kethmar field commanders were requesting permission to use more extreme measures. Some wanted to begin systematic extermination of human populations to set an example. Others suggested using biological weapons to make resistance impossible. But the Empire's leadership was reluctant to authorize such measures because they needed healthy slaves, not dead planets. As the first month of invasion came to an end, it was clear that the conflict was not going according to Kethmar expectations. They had come to Earth planning a quick and efficient conquest. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war of attrition against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every defeat. 6 months after the invasion began, the massive Kethmar processing facility in what used to be Hong Kong looked like a monument to alien efficiency. The complex stretched for kilometers along the coast, filled with machines designed to sort, catalog, and prepare human slaves for transport to other worlds. But inside the facility, nothing was working as planned. Jin-Ho crouched behind a pile of rubble on a hill overlooking the facility, studying the alien structures through stolen Kethmar observation equipment. The processing center was supposed to handle 50,000 humans per day, but the latest intelligence from Da-Un suggested it was operating at less than 20% capacity. The reason was simple. Humans refused to cooperate with their own enslavement. The aliens had built their facility based on data from 17 previous conquests. Every other species had eventually adapted to captivity, accepting their fate in exchange for basic survival. The Kethmar had efficient systems for housing, feeding, and organizing slave populations. What they did not have was a system for managing slaves who would rather die than work. Mira's analysis of the facility's operations revealed the scope of the problem. The aliens had designed their processing systems around the assumption that intelligent beings would choose survival over resistance when faced with overwhelming force. They had medical facilities to keep slaves healthy, education programs to teach useful skills, and reward systems to encourage productivity. But humans consistently chose the opposite of what the aliens expected. When offered better food for increased productivity, They shared their rations equally and worked as slowly as possible. When threatened with punishment for sabotage, they found new and creative ways to break machinery. When separated from their families as motivation to cooperate, they formed new family bonds with other prisoners and fought even harder. Tai Min had been planning the attack on the processing facility for months, gathering intelligence and resources from resistance cells across Asia. The facility was heavily defended, with energy barriers, automated weapons, and hundreds of Kethmar guards. Any direct assault would be suicide, which made it exactly the kind of operation humans specialized in. The attack began at dawn with coordinated strikes on the facility's power systems. Teams led by former electrical workers named Ki Hyun and Su Jin used their knowledge of infrastructure to target the alien power grid. They had studied captured Kethmar technology for weeks, learning that the aliens relied on centralized energy systems that could be disrupted if you knew where to strike. Dayun coordinated the operation from her mobile command center, using hacked alien communication networks to monitor enemy responses. What she discovered was deeply troubling. The aliens were no longer trying to capture humans for slavery. New orders from the Kethmar High Command instructed field forces to begin systematic elimination of human populations in areas where resistance was too strong. The change in alien tactics reflected a fundamental shift in their understanding of the situation. After 6 months of failed conquest, the Kethmar leadership had reached a conclusion that was unprecedented in their history. Some species could not be enslaved. But rather than admitting defeat, they had decided that humans represented a threat that needed to be eliminated entirely. Jinho's assault team breached the facility's outer defenses using a combination of explosives and captured alien weapons. The fighting was brutal and desperate, with humans using every advantage they could find. They knew the facility's layout better than the aliens because human prisoners had been mapping it for months, passing information through secret communication networks. Inside the processing center, Jinho discovered something that made his blood run cold. The aliens had built special chambers designed to break human will through psychological torture. These rooms used advanced technology to create scenarios that would force humans to choose between their own survival and the safety of others. The aliens believed that forcing such choices would eventually break down human resistance to slavery. But the torture chambers had failed completely. Instead of breaking humans, they had created something the aliens could not understand. Humans who emerged from the chambers were not broken, but transformed. They had faced their worst fears and chosen to endure suffering rather than betray their principles. This made them even more dangerous to the Kethmar system. Mira found the facility's research center, where alien scientists had been studying human psychology and biology for months. The research files contained detailed analyses of human behavior, but every conclusion reached the same baffling result. Humans appeared to be defective as a species because they consistently made choices that were harmful to their own survival. The alien researchers had documented hundreds of cases where humans chose death over submission, suffering over comfort, and sacrifice over safety. They had tried every method of control that had worked on other species: fear, reward, punishment, manipulation, and even kindness. Nothing produced the desired result of willing cooperation with the slave system. Tai Min's team reached the center of the facility, where thousands of humans were being held in detention areas. The rescue operation became a nightmare as they discovered that many prisoners were too weak to move. The aliens had been experimenting with different methods of breaking human resistance, including starvation, isolation, and exposure to various chemicals. But even in these terrible conditions, the human prisoners had maintained their resistance. They had organized themselves into support networks, sharing food and water equally regardless of age or health. They had created education programs, teaching children and maintaining their culture despite having no books or formal materials. Most importantly, they had continued to plan escapes and sabotage operations even when success seemed impossible. The alien behavioral specialist assigned to the facility, a Kethmar named Kethrin, was captured during the assault. Under interrogation, the alien revealed information that changed everything the resistance thought they knew about their enemy. The Kethmar Empire was facing a crisis that threatened its very existence. Kethrin explained that the empire had been built on a simple principle: superior technology could force any species into submission. For 1,000 years, this had been true. Every conquest had followed the same pattern of initial resistance, followed by eventual acceptance of Kethmar rule. The Empire's entire economic and social system was based on slave labor from conquered worlds. But the human conquest had revealed a fatal flaw in this system. The Kethmar had never learned to fight a real war because they had never needed to. Their military was designed for suppressing rebellions and managing surrendered populations, not for defeating determined enemies. They had overwhelming technological advantages but no understanding of how to use them effectively against opponents who refused to follow conventional rules. Da-Yun's analysis of intercepted communications confirmed Catherine's information. The Kethmar Empire was struggling with rebellions on 12 different worlds as news of human resistance spread through their slave populations. Species that had been subjugated for centuries were beginning to question whether their masters were truly invincible. The processing facility assault succeeded beyond all expectations. Not only did the resistance destroy the complex and free thousands of prisoners, but they also captured massive amounts of alien technology and intelligence. Most importantly, they proved that the Kethmar could be defeated in direct combat when humans were willing to accept casualties that no rational military force would consider acceptable. Mira discovered that the facility's research had yielded one crucial piece of information for the aliens. Human resistance was not based on ignorance or desperation, but on a fundamental difference in values. Humans genuinely believed that some things were more important than survival, including abstract concepts like freedom, dignity, and justice. This was incomprehensible to the Kethmar because their species had evolved without individual identity. When a Kethmar died, its knowledge and memories could be partially transferred to other members of its caste. Death was not final for them, so they could not understand why humans would choose it over continued existence in slavery. Jin-Ho realized during the battle that the aliens' greatest advantage was also their greatest weakness. Their technology was incredibly advanced, but it was designed by minds that could not conceive of truly irrational behavior. Human tactics worked precisely because they were illogical from a Kethmar perspective. The destruction of the Hong Kong facility marked a turning point in the war. For the first time, the aliens publicly acknowledged that their conquest of Earth was not proceeding according to plan. War Commander Velthak issued new orders calling for immediate reinforcement from other sectors of the Empire. But these reinforcements would have to be pulled from other conquered worlds where rebellions were already beginning. Taemin understood that they had reached a critical moment. The aliens were being forced to choose between maintaining control of their existing empire and conquering Earth. Either choice would weaken them significantly. If they sent more ships to Earth, their other worlds might rebel successfully. If they did not, Earth might inspire so much resistance that the entire empire could collapse. 2 years into the occupation, the Kethmar Empire faced a crisis unlike anything in their 1,000-year history. Da-Yun sat in her expanded command center aboard Jin-Ho's ship, monitoring communications from across the galaxy as alien civilization began to unravel. The intercepted messages painted a picture of chaos spreading through the Empire like a virus, and humans were the source of the infection. The breakthrough had come when Da-Yun discovered that the Kethmar communication networks were not just vulnerable to hacking but were actively being used against them. Captured human slaves on other worlds had learned to build crude communication devices from salvaged alien technology. They were sharing information about resistance tactics, teaching other species the methods that humans had developed through trial and desperation. Jin-Ho's resistance network had grown from a small group of survivors into a planet-wide organization with cells on every continent. But their greatest achievement was not military, but ideological. They had proven that the Kethmar could be defeated, and this proof was spreading to places the aliens had considered permanently secure. Mira worked frantically in her expanded laboratory, analyzing intelligence gathered from dozens of successful raids on alien facilities. What she had discovered about Kethmar psychology was both encouraging and terrifying. The aliens were not evil in any way humans could understand. They were simply incapable of comprehending individual identity as anything other than a malfunction. The Kethmar had evolved from social insects, where individual survival meant nothing compared to the survival of the hive. When they encountered other species, they naturally assumed that all intelligent life operated under similar principles. Their conquest methods were designed around the expectation that conquered species would reorganize themselves into efficient hierarchies under Kethmar leadership. But humans had proven that intelligent life could operate on completely different principles. Individual humans regularly sacrificed themselves for abstract ideals, for people they had never met, and for future generations they would never see. This behavior was not just unexpected to the Kethmar, it was incomprehensible. Taemin coordinated with resistance leaders around the world through an underground network that had become more sophisticated than most government communication systems. The network operated on principles of redundancy and mutual aid that the aliens could not disrupt because they could not understand how it worked. When the Kethmar destroyed a communication hub, 3 more would appear to replace it. When they captured resistance leaders, new ones emerged from the general population. When they eliminated entire resistance cells, the surviving members would join other groups and share their knowledge. The network grew stronger through destruction rather than weaker. This pattern was being repeated on other worlds throughout the Kethmar Empire. Species that had been enslaved for generations were rediscovering the concept of individual worth and collective resistance. The carefully maintained order of the empire was breaking down as subject populations learned that their masters could be defeated. Da-Eun's most important discovery came when she managed to decode high-level communications from the Kethmar High Command. The empire's leadership was facing rebellions on 17 different worlds, and their standard suppression methods were failing everywhere. The rebellions were using human-inspired tactics that the Kethmar military could not counter effectively. The aliens had built their empire using overwhelming technological superiority and psychological manipulation. They conquered species by demonstrating their invincibility and then offering survival in exchange for submission. But humans had broken this formula by proving that technological superiority did not guarantee victory against opponents who were willing to accept unlimited casualties. Mira made a crucial breakthrough when she successfully interrogated a captured Kethmar intelligence officer named Vrextal. The alien revealed that the Empire's expansion had been frozen for the first time in centuries. All available military resources were being diverted to contain rebellions and maintain control of existing territories. The intelligence officer also revealed something that changed the Resistance's understanding of their enemy's motivations. The Kethmar were not conquering other species for resources or territory. They were conquering them because their biological nature required constant expansion and dominance. Without subject populations to control, Kethmar society would collapse into chaos. This biological imperative meant that the aliens could not simply withdraw from their empire and leave other species alone. They needed to maintain dominance to survive as a civilization, but human resistance had made continued expansion impossible while simultaneously inspiring rebellions that threatened their existing conquests. Jinho realized the full implications of this information during a raid on a Kethmar command center in Shanghai. The facility was filled with tactical displays showing the status of conflicts throughout the empire. Every display showed the same pattern: stable conquests, turning into active war zones as subject species adopted human resistance methods. The most shocking discovery was that the Kethmar had never actually fought a real war. Their military was entirely organized around suppressing rebellions and managing conquered populations. They had no doctrine for fighting opponents who could match their determination and adaptability. Every battle against humans was teaching the aliens that their technological advantages meant nothing against enemies who refused to follow rational tactical principles. Tai Min witnessed this firsthand during the Shanghai raid when his team encountered a group of Kethmar soldiers who surrendered immediately when surrounded. The aliens had never been trained to fight to the death because their culture had no concept of individual sacrifice. When faced with certain defeat, they naturally sought preservation through surrender. But the humans did not know what to do with alien prisoners who wanted to surrender. The Kethmar had never offered humans the same option, and their treatment of captured humans had been brutal. The Resistance had to develop entirely new protocols for dealing with enemies who were not prepared to die for their cause. Da-Eun's analysis of captured Kethmar databases revealed the Empire's fatal weakness. Their entire civilization was built on the assumption that superior technology would always triumph over inferior technology. They had never developed backup systems for dealing with opponents who could match their technological capabilities through captured equipment and reverse engineering. Human engineers and scientists had been studying alien technology for 2 years, learning to adapt and improve it for their own use. Weapons designed for compliance were modified for warfare. Communication systems built for hierarchical control were converted to support horizontal networks. Transportation designed for moving slaves was turned into platforms for guerrilla attacks. Mira discovered that the aliens had made their biggest mistake in underestimating human adaptability. The Kethmar improved their technology slowly and methodically over centuries. Humans modified and improved captured alien equipment within weeks or months. Each successful raid gave the Resistance better tools and deeper understanding of alien capabilities. The turning point came when Da-1 intercepted a communication from the Kethmar High Command to War Commander Velthak. The Empire's leadership was ordering immediate withdrawal from the Sol system, but not because they were admitting defeat. They were reclassifying humans as a containment threat that needed to be isolated rather than conquered. The aliens planned to establish a blockade around Earth and eliminate any human attempts to spread beyond their home system. They would rather lose one potential slave world than risk the continued spread of human ideas throughout their empire. But this plan revealed that they still did not understand what they were facing. Jin Ho's network had already begun launching expeditions to other star systems using captured alien ships. Human volunteers were taking their resistance methods directly to enslaved populations throughout the empire. The blockade would be too late to contain the spread of revolutionary ideas. Taemin coordinated these expeditions through a careful selection process that identified humans who were most likely to survive and adapt to alien environments. Each expedition carried technical specifications for building communication equipment, tactical manuals for organizing resistance, and most importantly, proof that the Kethmar could be defeated. The captured intelligence revealed that these human expeditions were already having an impact far beyond their numbers. Species that had never successfully resisted Kethmar rule were organizing effective rebellions within months of contact with human advisors. The Empire's carefully maintained stability was dissolving into chaos. Mira realized that the conflict was no longer about Earth's freedom, but about the survival of two completely different approaches to civilization. The Kethmar represented hierarchical efficiency and technological superiority. Humans represented individual dignity and adaptive resilience. Only one approach could survive the encounter. As the second year of occupation drew to a close, both sides prepared for a final confrontation that would determine not just the fate of Earth, but the future structure of galactic civilization. The aliens had superior numbers and technology. The final battle for Earth began not with weapons or explosions, but with a simple message broadcast simultaneously across every communication channel on the planet. War Commander Velthak's voice, translated into every human language, announced the Kethmar Empire's ultimatum: complete surrender within 72 hours or total extermination of the human species. Jin Ho stood on the bridge of his ship, now upgraded with the best alien technology the Resistance had captured over 2 years of fighting. Around him, the command staff that had grown from a handful of desperate survivors into the leadership of a global revolution prepared for humanity's final stand. They knew the aliens were no longer trying to conquer Earth. They were trying to eliminate the threat that humans represented to their empire. The ultimatum revealed the depth of Kethmar desperation. Intelligence gathered by Da-Un's network showed that rebellions had now spread to over 30 worlds throughout their empire. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were successfully overthrowing their alien masters, using tactics learned from human resistance fighters. The empire was collapsing from within, and the Kethmar leadership had decided that destroying Earth was preferable to losing control entirely. Mira's analysis of the alien fleet positions showed that the Kethmar had assembled the largest military force in their recorded history. Over 200 ships surrounded Earth, carrying weapons capable of destroying the planet's entire biosphere. But the aliens had made a crucial error in their understanding of human psychology. They believed that the threat of extinction would finally force humans to surrender. Instead, the ultimatum had the opposite effect. Resistance groups that had been working independently for 2 years suddenly coordinated their efforts with unprecedented efficiency. The threat of total annihilation did not break human morale. It unified humanity around a single, simple principle. They would rather die free than live as slaves. Taemin coordinated the global defense from a command center hidden in the mountains of North Korea. His screens showed resistance activity on every continent as humans prepared for their final battle. The aliens expected a desperate, chaotic response to their ultimatum. Instead, they faced a coordinated strategy that had been planned for months by people who had always known this moment would come. The human plan was breathtakingly simple and completely insane by any rational military standard. Rather than trying to defend Earth directly against overwhelming alien superiority, the Resistance would launch simultaneous attacks on every Kethmar ship in the system. Most of these attacks would fail, and most of the attackers would die, but the goal was not survival. It was to ensure that the aliens left with nothing. Dae-Yun had spent months preparing for this moment by infiltrating every level of Kethmar communication and control systems. Her network of human hackers and sympathetic aliens on other worlds had created a virus that would activate simultaneously across the Empire when the battle began. The virus would not destroy alien technology, but would fill their networks with a simple message: freedom is possible. The battle began 18 hours before the ultimatum expired when resistance fighters around the world launched coordinated suicide attacks on alien installations. These were not desperate last stands, but carefully planned operations designed to maximize psychological impact on the Kethmar forces. Each attack demonstrated that humans would choose death over submission, even when victory was impossible. Jin-Ho led the assault on the alien flagship personally, knowing that he was almost certainly flying to his death. His ship and dozens of others launched from hidden bases around the world, using captured alien technology to pierce the enemy's defenses. The Kethmar had superior firepower, but they had never faced opponents who treated their own survival as irrelevant to the mission's success. The space battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships, many of them converted civilian vessels, attacked the alien fleet with tactics that violated every principle of rational warfare. They used their own ships as weapons, ramming into alien vessels at full speed. They deliberately triggered reactor explosions that destroyed both human and alien ships. They fought with a fury that the Kethmar could not understand or counter. Mira coordinated ground operations as alien forces attempted to establish new landing zones for their final assault. But they found no population centers to target. No infrastructure to destroy, no leaders to negotiate with. Humans had evacuated their cities and moved into hidden positions throughout the countryside. The aliens could destroy empty buildings, but they could not eliminate the human spirit. The turning point came when Taemin's forces successfully captured and held a Kethmar command ship for 17 minutes before it was retaken. 17 minutes was enough for Dae-Yun's virus to spread through the alien network and reach every corner of their empire. Within hours, rebellion erupted simultaneously on over 50 worlds as enslaved species learned that the seemingly invincible Kethmar fleet was being fought to a standstill by primitive humans. War Commander Veltak watched his carefully planned extermination operation dissolve into chaos as reports flooded in from across the Empire. The human resistance was not just fighting for Earth. They had successfully exported their revolution to every world under Kethmar control. The choice was no longer between conquering Earth and withdrawing. It was between abandoning Earth immediately or watching the entire Empire collapse. Jin-Ho's final assault on the flagship succeeded beyond all expectations when his team managed to capture the ship's central computer core. The intelligence they recovered revealed the full scope of the Kethmar crisis. The Empire was facing total collapse as their slave populations realized that their masters could be defeated by beings with primitive technology and unbreakable will. But the most important discovery was not military intelligence, but philosophical revelation. The captured files contained detailed analyses of human behavior that had baffled alien researchers for 2 years. The Kethmar had finally understood what made humans different. They valued individual dignity more than collective survival. This realization came too late to save the Kethmar Empire. Daeyun's virus had spread their own research throughout their communication networks, teaching enslaved species the psychological principles that made human resistance so effective. The aliens had inadvertently provided their slaves with the tools needed to overthrow them. Mira made the final breakthrough when she decoded the Kethmar withdrawal orders. The Empire was not retreating from Earth because they had been militarily defeated. They were fleeing because they had encountered something that threatened their fundamental understanding of intelligent life. Humans had proven that technological superiority was meaningless against opponents who fought for principles rather than survival. The alien fleet began withdrawing from Earth orbit after 76 hours of continuous fighting. They left behind thousands of their own dead and wounded, massive amounts of advanced technology, and something far more valuable: proof that any species could resist successfully if they were willing to pay the price in blood and sacrifice. Taemin coordinated the final phase of the operation as human teams ensured that the aliens left with nothing useful. Every abandoned facility was destroyed, every piece of equipment was sabotaged, every database was wiped clean. The Kethmar would gain no intelligence from their failed conquest that could help them improve their methods for future invasions. But the humans made sure that the departing aliens carried something with them: witnesses to human resistance who would spread the story throughout the galaxy. Alien prisoners who had been treated with mercy despite their species' brutality would return to their empire carrying tales of humans who fought for abstract ideals and died for people they had never met. Daeun's final hack into the Kethmar communication network ensured that the story of Earth's resistance would be preserved in alien archives forever. Future generations of enslaved species would learn that the mighty Kethmar Empire had been forced to retreat from a primitive world whose inhabitants valued freedom more than life. As the last alien ships disappeared beyond Earth's orbit, Jin-Ho stood among the ruins of Seoul and contemplated what humanity had accomplished. They had not merely won their freedom, they had changed the fundamental balance of power in the galaxy. The Kethmar Empire would never recover from the revelations that humans had forced upon them. Mira's post-battle analysis confirmed what many had suspected. The aliens had not just lost a single conquest, but had lost their ability to maintain their empire. The psychological foundations of Kethmar civilization had been shattered by the discovery that some species could not be enslaved because they would rather die than submit. The reports coming in from across the galaxy confirmed the scope of the transformation. World after world was declaring independence from Kethmar rule. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years was dissolving as its subject species learned that their masters were not invincible gods, but merely another fallible civilization. Taemin established communication with the first free alien worlds, beginning the process of building a new galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. The humans who had fought so desperately for their own freedom became teachers,